Marc Berman, New York Post, New York Knicks beat writer, all about the Knicks, and he joins us here on Big Board Sports to talk about the victory over Brooklyn last night, and of course the Carmelo Anthony storylines with the trading deadline coming up Feb 23rd. Marc Berman, one of our absolute favorites, known Marc for a long time, worked here in the Capital Region. We welcome him to Big Board Sports on ESPN Radio. Good morning, Marc.
Hey, Roger. How are you?
Good. How you been? Okay?
Yeah, it's been a trying season, and I never expected it would come to this.
No, never expected it would either. What did you make of the win last night in Brooklyn? At least they did win the game, and they did it with bench, right? It was the bench guys last night with Melo out in the fourth quarter that ended up winning that game last night.
Yeah, I think Knicks fans who are looking for the future, had to feel good because it was all about Porzingis and Hernan Gomez clinching that game, coming up with big defensive plays, big offensive plays in the fourth quarter, a big rally, and Carmelo sat for the final 15 minutes. I honestly do not think he's ever been benched like that in the fourth quarter since he's been a Knick. I don't think he would have been benched had management, not decided that, they're kind of trying to move on. Whether a deal happens, we don't know. Whether Carmelo allows a deal to happen, we don't know, but Jeff Hornacek had the guts to bench Melo for the final 15 minutes of the game because the bench was doing so well.
And Marc, in listening to the post game, and we just played an interview with Carmelo, it almost sounded like he was okay with that.
Well, the words were that he was okay with that. Listen, he was on the bench, and he was cheering, and he had a smile on his face, and he seemed okay, but Carmelo has a huge ego, and I kind of felt that, in his mind, he was almost saying, wow, maybe it is time for this franchise to move on without me. I mean, he never would have come close to saying that after a victory last night, but listen, he said all the right things. He wasn't bubbly, obviously, but he said, listen, he understood it. Listen, it's the second night of a back-to-back, and Carmelo has really struggled this season on the second nights of back-to-backs, and he was clearly fatigued. He had no lift. He had been playing very, very well up until last night's game. So it was easier for him to accept in that way. But in the larger picture, he knows what management is thinking right now. And I think he realizes that maybe it is time for the Knicks to go younger.
Well, I'll tell you what. If I'm Hornacek, I gotta make sure I'm increasing minutes for Hernan Gomez and maybe not getting as many minutes for Joakim Noah. I mean, I know he's got the big contract, Marc, with $72 million, but Hernan Gomez looks awfully good out there to me, and another really strong performance again last night. They're almost a better team when he's on the floor.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I just can't believe that Hornacek has not yet pulled the trigger on that move. Sitting Noah, I believe at most Noah deserves 8 minutes a night, and that's charity because of his contract. And he's a good locker room guy. You don't want to shut him out of the rotation completely. But it's clear that Hernan Gomez and Kyle O'Quinn are the better players right now. And Hernan Gomez, he's a rookie out of Sevilla and Madrid. He had played the last 2 years. The Knicks got lucky in terms of finding him. They were looking at Porzingis. In fact, GM Steve Mills had gone over to take another look at Porzingis, and they saw Hernan Gomez with post skills that would be nice for the triangle, and they decided to take a flyer on him. It's amazing. He's got so much offensive skill, little moves around the basket. He has a nice vision. He passes the ball out of the post. And defensively, sometimes he's out of position, maybe a little slow, but he's strong and rugged. He really, this past couple of weeks, he's really come into his own. He'll be the starting center for the Knicks, if not the next game, after the All-Star break, because this Noah thing is just ridiculous. He doesn't do anything for the team right now.
Zingis last night, huge fourth quarter, 12 points, and 19 total, and had double digits in rebounds and rebounding well from the flu. But the big story is hanging over this Knicks team, Mark, and I'm anxious to get your viewpoint here. What is going to happen with Carmelo Anthony? It's pretty clear they want him out, and they're shopping him all over the place. But he has a no-trade clause. So what is going to give here between now and February 23rd? Do you think he'll be a Knick at the trading deadline?
I think it's still 50-50, but I think Carmelo is starting to warm up to the idea of moving on. You know, we talked to him a few days ago in Washington, talked about his family. His son is 9 years old. You know, he loves New York. Lala has a lot of work in New York, but she's also got a lot of work in Los Angeles. And they have a home there, a second home in Los Angeles. So the Clippers thing is the only situation I could see him going. And they have to really, you know, get a third team involved. They really like Austin Rivers. They met with him over the summer when he was a free agent. And if you've ever met Austin Rivers, he comes across as the nicest, smartest type of guy, and he's really improved. So if the Knicks can get Austin and maybe a late first-round pick somehow, the Clippers unfortunately don't have first-round picks to deal until like 2020. I think they just need a third team. It's going to be hard, you know, with that $28 million contract going to the Clippers, and they have to unload Jamal Crawford, and he's 36 years old. And the Knicks really don't want a 36-year-old player on a 3-year deal. The whole point is to get younger. So I think the Knicks are trying hard, and I think if it's the Clippers, he'll accept it. If it's Boston, I'm not as sure, but I do believe the Celtics have assets to get Carmelo. And if the Knicks go on a hot streak, I think maybe everyone backs off. And if the Knicks really are real back in playoff position at the trade deadline. But last night doesn't help Carmelo's future with the Knicks, that's for sure.
No, there's no question about it. As he's benched in the fourth quarter, Knicks come up with a win on the road against the lowly Brooklyn Nets. Where do you stand on Phil Jackson? Personally, I think he's really done a bad job start to finish here so far in running this Knicks organization. You agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a disappointment. I'm shocked at how poorly he's done on every level. Obviously, the moves nothing has worked out except maybe Porzingis, and even Hernan Gomez is more Steve Mills than Phil Jackson. But even dealing with the media, he hasn't spoken to the New York media since September 22nd. He doesn't have an impact on the players in the locker room. He's kept his distance. I just don't understand, you know, what he's doing. Maybe we'll find out in his next book. But just his whole, you know, when they brought him in, $60 million, I thought he was going to have so much influence in the locker room. But he's made some decision that he doesn't want to step on the coach's toes. But the bottom line is his personnel moves have been failures, starting with the Tyson Chandler trade, and then this new experiment with Derrick Rose and Noah, which is one of the worst signings in history. You know, there's still seven games under 500. Everything he's done has not worked out. Terribly disappointing. Great coach, horrible president. I think Dolan realizes that at this point, and I wonder, you know, if this summer, if the Knicks really tank it this year, if they, you know, decide to part ways mutually.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Marc Berman, always a pleasure having you on for a few minutes on Big Board Sports on the state of the New York Knicks that are getting a lot of headlines these days in New York for sure. And we'll talk to you down the road. But thanks again, Marc. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot, Roger.
Take care. Marc Berman, New York Post beat writer.